Hi and welcome. I'm Andi Mioč and you're watching Context. Hundreds of Palestinians joined an anti-Hamas protest in the north of the Gaza Strip, chanting "Out Hamas" and demanding an end to the war with Israel. Gaza's health officials came out with an update saying that at least 830 people were killed since Israel resumed its military operations on March 18th. Meanwhile, Israeli military reported that 2 rockets were launched from Gaza on southern Israel. The now collapsed ceasefire lasted just shy of 2 months. According to reports, Egypt made a new proposal for a truce that would see Hamas release 5 living hostages in return for Israel allowing humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip and implementing a weeks-long pause in the fighting. Hamas is still holding 59 hostages, with 24 presumed alive. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu repeated his threat to seize Gaza's territory if Hamas does not release hostages. On the latest in the Gaza war and the prospects of a new ceasefire, we're talking with Maurice Hirsch of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and Labib Taha, a researcher and political analyst coming to us from Ramallah. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with the rare public show of opposition to Hamas we've seen in the north of the Gaza Strip. Labib, some accounts from the ground put the figure to up to 2,000 people. What do you make of such a protest?
These protests reject the Israeli narration that all Gazans are Hamas and all Hamas are Gazans. This may hold the hope that will be an end to the war. All Palestinians, I believe all Palestinians, or at least most Palestinians, looking for an end for war. We are people, we are humankind, we have pains, we have atrocities, we suffer from demolishing everything in our life. So, as a human beings, which is some parts, some rivals may try to neglect that we are human beings and said something harsh about us. What happens in North Gaza defy this narration, defy the Israeli narrations that Palestinians are bloodthirsty, need to kill, need to destroy everything, while the other side, which is Israel, is the part who destroy everything. This is not a war. We need to stop this atrocity, which is take place against us.
Well, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem saw its fair share of protests against the government led by Netanyahu. Truth be told, mainly about the state of democracy in the country, but also with some opposing the war as it endangers the hostages. Maurice, what's the pulse in Israel? Is the general public tired of war? Are the hostages' families' pleas being heard?
I think that the general pulse that we can see in Israel is a drive of almost the entire population to secure the release of the hostages. Nothing will stop us from achieving that goal. And really the entire population, even within the divides of who promotes one path or those who promote another path, I think the common denominator, the common factor is the drive to bring about the freeing of the hostages. This is something that has to be done. It could immediately alleviate very much of the dire situation in the Gaza Strip. And whilst the protests in the northern Gaza Strip are definitely a positive sign, what we haven't really seen is that turning those ideas into really concrete actions. Bring out the hostages. If people remember, just a few months ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu offered a $5 million prize and free passage to anywhere in the world to any Gazan who brings about the release of an Israeli hostage. Unfortunately, to this day, despite the cries that we've seen, not one Gazan has taken him up on his offer.
Well, we could have seen almost 2 months of a fragile truce, which brought some respite to Palestinians in Gaza, with even plans for rebuilding the Strip being drawn up, most notably the Egyptian plan backed by Arab states and the European Union. Everything has been put on hold since Israel resumed its military campaign. Cairo has reportedly made a new ceasefire proposal. Labib, how realistic is it to think of a new truce right now? Do you expect U.S. pressure, like something we've seen ahead of the previous ceasefire agreement?
I hope so, but hopes not always makes actions. We need an end to the war, not a truce. But regarding to the positions of American administration and Netanyahu administration, I don't think so. They need true victory, or a genuine victory, which means that they want to get their hostages without paying any price. They consider that the history starts in 7th October 1923. Nothing before and nothing after. I hope that one day I live till I see that Gaza prosperity area. There will be peace, not in Gaza, in all the region. I hope so, but I'm not sure whether such hopes can make sense.
Maurice, what's your take on this? How realistic is it to talk about a new truce now? And would you say that internal politics in Israel are affecting the prospects of a new truce? We can remember that two ministers threatened to quit the government before the last ceasefire took effect. Ben-Gvir now rejoined after the fighting resumed. Is Tel Aviv's mind firmly fixed on continuing this war?
I think that what we should expect is an Israeli and an American-backed demand for the release of all of the hostages in one go, not in drips and drabs as we saw in the previous truce. We saw exactly what Hamas did when we adopted that approach. They used every release as a disgusting show of heinous, really propaganda, parading the hostages, telling one hostage that he would soon be reunited with his wife and children in the clear knowledge that they had already murdered his wife and his children. They even used the bodies of babies, the Bibas babies, and the body of Shiri Bibas that they didn't return as part of this heinous propaganda, really spectacle, or debacle is really the right term. And I don't think that Israel will be willing to again accept that type of approach. President Trump said it very clearly. He demands the immediate release of all of the hostages unconditionally. It is not a question of what price Israel will pay. The hostages need to be released immediately, and then other discussions can be held as to what will then be the future of the Gaza Strip. But whilst these genocidal terrorists continue to hold the hostages, I fear that the only path forward is more bombings and more Israeli soldiers and tanks on the ground to secure that very clear objective.
Well, Labib, what do you think? What can be done here? What are the viable options for ending this bloodshed? Is it, like Maurice said, U.S. leadership, external pressure? Is it maybe the Palestinian Authority getting enough support among Gazans to maybe take over power in the Strip, or something else entirely?
Palestinian Authority role is a vital thing in this era, at this stage. This should be the idea that will be acceptable by all sides. National scene need a Palestinian role. Palestinian authority established by peace accords. So it should take its responsibility in Gaza and the West Bank without Israeli obstacles, without Israeli restrictions to its role. This is a big question at this time. About the after war, I believe it is not so difficult if the Palestinian Authority takes its role.
Maurice, we know that U.S. has led the effort on mediating the previous ceasefire agreement along with Qatar and Egypt. Would you say that maybe Saudis could play a bigger role here? Would the normalization of relations with Israel be a possible incentive to bring all sides to the table and end the fighting?
I think definitely the goal of normalization with Saudi Arabia is something that should be discussed without any connection to the Gaza Strip. It is in Saudi Arabia's best interest to get to a stage of normalization with Israel, not only in Israel's interest. And we are hoping really that we can expand the window that was opened by the Abraham Accords, whereby the Arab world doesn't allow the genocidal terrorists like Hamas or Mahmoud Abbas to dictate and really hinder their own prosperity, their own progress. That was really the key to the Abraham Accords, understanding that we have no fight with our other Arab neighbors. We are looking to really live in peace and prosperity with everyone, maybe providing mutual defense against the Iranian evil of access. And that's something which really, I hope that the Saudi Arabian leadership will be able to really distance itself from the vile terrorism of the Gazan genocidal terrorists, because that's not something that I believe that they would like to be associated with. I don't think that they believe that that's what Islam teaches, that you can murder, butcher, rape, behead babies. That I would like to believe is not the teachings of Islam in Saudi Arabia. And so I believe that we have more in common as Israel with Saudi Arabia than Saudi Arabia has with the Gazan terrorists.
Labib, what do you make of what the Arab states are doing right now? Not only Egypt and Jordan, but Saudi Arabia, for example. Are they contributing to bringing the sides to a table to end this war?
There is no vital role to Arab states. I like to speak about this issue. Dreams and illusions didn't make sense. Sorry. There is no Arab role. There is no even European role, the role here is to Israel and America, the United States. Other roles are fringe roles, no real roles. If my colleague consider Mahmoud Abbas a terrorist, so I propose to them to look for any human being or any creature to make peace with. Who is a person that you will not accuse him of terrorism?
Well, obviously the solution must be acceptable to both sides. Maurice, would you care to respond? Who would be an acceptable negotiating partner for Israel in your mind?
Well, maybe instead of pointing to an exact personality or exact person, I can maybe try and explain the caricature traits which I don't think define a leader looking for peace. For example, the Palestinian authorities pay for slave policy, where they've spent literally billions of dollars incentivizing, promoting, and rewarding terror. That is the fundamental legacy of Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas. He was the one who passed the law in 2004. He was the one who passed the regulations linking the time spent by terrorists in prison to the salary that they received. He was the one who approved a massive hike in the salaries that the PA, so cash-strapped, pays to the terrorist salaries. In some cases, a 300% rise in their salaries from 4,000 to 12,000 shekels. This is something which doesn't promote peace, doesn't talk about peace. And it's unfortunate that that is one of President Abbas's main legacy assets. If you talk about the denial of Israel's right to exist, which is something which is constantly pushed by President Abbas, this also doesn't define someone who is looking for peace. If you look at the radicalization year after year of the Palestinian Authority's school curriculum, teaching children, poisoning the minds of the Palestinian youth year upon year, generation upon generation, to hate, kill, and be killed. These are not characteristics that define someone looking for peace. And I truly believe that there are really courageous Palestinian leaders that don't believe in that way of life, that do see another avenue. All that President Abbas has brought to the Palestinians is more suffering and more death. He has not managed to present any idea of coexistence, any idea of peace. He has not abandoned any of these pugnacious policies and initiatives. And sadly, the Palestinian people who truly deserve better are paying the price of Mahmoud Abbas's rejection of Israel's right to exist and his incentivization and rewarding of terrorism.
Well, Labib, we heard Maurice's opinions and views on Mahmoud Abbas. In your mind, is there another sort of leadership being born, either in Gaza or the occupied West Bank? Is there someone who could replace both Hamas, both Fatah, maybe someone who would unite the Palestinians?
I want to say, sir, that I don't speak on behalf of Mahmoud Abbas or any other Palestinian faction. But I mentioned Mahmoud Abbas as a symbol to the Palestinian who is rejected by a percentage of Palestinians because they consider them recognized of Israel. In political relation, I don't even hear that a nation have to admit the right of someone who built his state on others' land, in his right to do such things. Yani Israelis tries to make Palestinian leaders, but the trail was failed. So I believe, in order to answer your questions, any Palestinian who will be acceptable by Palestinians, first of all, by Palestinians, because the Palestinian leader would be a national one, speaks on behalf of his people, not to be agreeable by Israelis or Americans or Chinese or by Indians. So what will be acceptable to the world is not a big deal. I believe this is not a big deal. This is my leader. And the person I elected it is my leader, represent my opinion and my views. So Mahmoud Abbas is an aged person, with a great respect to him. In one day or after, he shall go. Hamas, don't forget that Hamas is not acceptable by all Palestinians. Percent of our people support Hamas, as well as on the other side, there are a person who supports extremists. So I hope so. We need transformation in leadership. We need a leadership which is suitable to the current stage in our life.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your opinions and views. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. And thank you for watching. Do stay tuned to A News.